Good morning and good afternoon to those of you who are joining us for the second series of our Behind the Bench panel. In this second installment, you will hear from a diverse panel of judges across the country who have done such interesting things prior to getting on the bench, so that hopefully you, as a law student or a young lawyer, you will be able to gain practical career guidance by learning about the journey that these distinguished judges have taken prior to assuming their position on the bench. I am Magistrate Judge Diana Son Quiroga. I'm a magistrate judge in the Southern District of Texas. And this morning or / afternoon, depending on your time zone, we are joined by the Honorable Peggy Kuo, who is a United States Magistrate Judge in the Eastern District of New York. We are also joined by Judge Jerusha T. Adams. The Honorable Judge Adams is a Magistrate Judge in the Middle District of Alabama. We also have with us the Honorable Omar Abelson. Judge Abelson sits in the Southern District of West Virginia. And lastly, all the way on the West Coast, we have Magistrate Judge the Honorable Michael B. Kaufman, who sits in the Southern District of California. I would like to encourage everybody in the audience to please submit your questions as the judges talk about themselves and their backgrounds. I will be moderating the conversation this afternoon. It is really just that, a conversation between the judges and you, members of our distinguished audience. Please submit your questions in the chat, and if you can, feel free to just mute your audio, turn off your video so that we can highlight the panel speakers. We will begin with just a short introduction by each of the judges, just so that you, members of the audience, get a brief overview of the things that they have done prior to getting on the bench. We will then proceed with specific questions about each of the stages of their careers, and that will also afford you more insight into their career backgrounds and how that might give you some advice about yours. So why don't we begin with Judge Kuo. Judge Kuo, if you would say a few words about the long journey, the very varied journey with great diverse experience that you had prior to getting on the bench in the Eastern District of New York.
Okay. Thank you so much, Judge Sutton Quiroga. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's so wonderful to see so many law students who've signed on to hear what we have to say, and it shows that you're very interested in pursuing your legal careers and perhaps becoming a judge someday. So I started my legal journey in law school when I took a clinical program. Well, actually, my first summer, I took an internship at the Legal Aid Society in New York City that did criminal defense work for indigent clients. I had never thought about doing criminal work, but that work that summer really inspired me to take a second look at criminal law. It seemed very exciting. I wanted to be in the courtroom. That was my goal, or one of my goals when I went to law school, and it was also an opportunity to do some good in the world. And so that really helped me direct the remaining time I had in law school. I clerked for the DC Court of Appeals after I graduated, which also was an opportunity to work very deeply in the criminal area, since everybody in the District of Columbia had a right of appeal of their criminal cases. And then I became an assistant U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia, where I did about 60 jury trials in the 4 years that I was there. That almost never happens these days, but back then it was possible. I took a year off. I studied criminal law in Germany. I did some comparative legal studies there. And I came back and I joined the Justice Department in the Civil Rights Division in the criminal section. Again, this was another branch of my interest and passion in law school, which was civil rights. So we prosecuted police misconduct and hate crimes throughout the country. And it was a really wonderful opportunity to see and travel around the country and get to know different parts of the country and enforce the civil rights laws. Then I had the opportunity to go overseas to The Hague, where I prosecuted war crimes. And so that was kind of the third aspect of my prosecutorial history experience. And that was the Yugoslavia Tribunal, where I did 2 major trials, including one that was a 6-month trial prosecuting mass rape in Bosnia. So after that, I came back to the United States and I pivoted at that point into private practice. I had never done that before. I wanted to be in New York City, where my family was, where my parents still were. And so I made that jump, and we could talk a little bit more about those kinds of transitions. I did that for a few years. Then I had the opportunity to go to the New York Stock Exchange as the chief hearing officer, hearing securities enforcement cases. Then I worked for the city of New York as a general counsel and deputy commissioner for the tribunal, the agency that is basically the municipal tribunal for the city. And then about 10 years ago, I applied to and became a magistrate judge here in Brooklyn in the Eastern District of New York. So it is a varied journey. I don't think it's typical. But we can talk about the pros and cons of those taking that approach.
Thank you so much, Judge. Cool. Let me turn it over to Judge Adams. There's some overlap at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Middle District of Alabama, but she also has other experiences. Thank you for sharing with us, Judge Adams.
Thank you. Good morning, afternoon. I'm so happy to be here. And my career was all stateside. I'm so impressed by Judge Cole. I haven't traveled anywhere, haven't been anywhere for my job. But after graduating law school, I was a law clerk. So I clerked for a magistrate judge for 2 years, a district judge for 2.5 years, and I clerked on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals for a year, and then I returned to district court as a career law clerk. Then I left the court and joined the U.S. Attorney's Office for 11 years. 8 years I was a criminal AUSA, 3 years I was a civil AUSA, and I was senior litigation counsel for 4 years during criminal and civil when I worked in both units. And then I decided after 18 years to go to private practice, and so I became a partner at a law firm where I did employment defense and some healthcare fraud, some appellate work. And then after 11 months in private practice, I applied to be a magistrate judge and was selected to be a magistrate judge.
Let me go ahead and throw it over to Judge Alboson, who, like you, Judge Adams, did a lot of his work on the state side and on the state bench.
Well, thank you, Judge. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, I'm glad to be on this panel with my esteemed colleagues. I started after I went to law school. I got a summer internship with a law firm in my hometown, and so I knew early on that when I got that internship, they told me if I worked for them for a couple of summers, they would give me the opportunity to be employed with them after I graduated law school. So I didn't have to go looking for employment. I knew I had a job when I graduated law school, and it was an insurance defense type firm. Did that for about 2 years after I graduated, and then went to a plaintiffs oriented firm. And in that firm, I did general practice law. Even though it was a plaintiffs focused firm, I did the general practice. I did all kinds of law from domestic cases, child custody, child support, real estate, torts, crime, property work, bankruptcy work. I did it all. When I say I was a general practice attorney, I didn't turn down too many things. Did landlord-tenant work on both sides, the landlord and the tenant. So I did everything. I represented banks. I represented lenders. I mean, mortgagees. I did it all. And then an opportunity came open for me with a position in the state court that I applied for, and I was appointed by the governor of West Virginia at the time, Joe Manchin. And I got appointed that position. It was a newly created judgeship in my county. And as a result of that, I had to run for election a year and a half later, and I ran for election and squeaked by with 70% of the vote and got elected. And I served in that position for 7 years, getting ready to run for re-election again in my 8th year when this position came open in the Southern District. And I applied for it, and 3 months later, I was offered the position, and I took it, and then I've been reappointed to this position since then. So my education didn't stop there, though. In 2019, I went to Mendenhall School of Auctioneering and became a licensed auctioneer, and I do that on a regular basis. And I am the reigning West Virginia bid calling champion for the state of West Virginia. So, it's a little bit out there, but it's not as glamorous and as impressive as Judge Coe, but it is a championship in the state of West Virginia.
That sounds like a lot of fun, Judge Albosin. Let me now turn it over to Judge Kaufman, who did also interesting things in his backgrounds, including a fellowship that I think some of you law clerks interns might also consider in addition to clerkships.
So thanks, Judge, and it's great to be here with everyone. And good morning, good afternoon to all the law students who are with us. Yeah, so after I graduated from college, I first clerked for a year on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and then after that, knew I wanted to break into doing public interest work, and so I was fortunate to get a Skadden Fellowship to work at a nonprofit in the Bay Area called the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, where I did a project centered on workers' rights. So I was doing wage and hour work, some human trafficking cases, a mix of state and federal court work, and then some sort of policy advocacy stuff. Then I did actually a second fellowship at the ACLU of Southern California on a year fellowship through my law school, where I was doing an immigrants' rights project, and then managed to stick around after that and get a staff attorney job at the ACLU here in Los Angeles, where I stayed for about 14 years. And then most recently, I was working at the Federal Public Defender's Office in Los Angeles in their appeals unit. So I was just doing appeals of in criminal cases. And then I'm surely the junior judge on the panel here. I joined the court in February, so I've only been on the bench short of 4 months. But it's been fun, and I look forward to talking about the transition.
Wow. So good to have you on the bench as a colleague, Judge Kaufman.
Thank you.
Let me circle back and begin our Q&A portion of the panel discussion. Judge Kuo, you mentioned you had a clinic in law school, and that kind of opened up for you this dimension of criminal practice that may not have been something on your radar before. Can we explore that and talk to our audience, since most of them are still in law school? What experience you had in law school that helped you prepare for the legal profession? It could be a class, an internship, a clinic, anything that might have had a major impact for you during law school. Judge Kuo.
Yes. So in my first year of law school, I knew I didn't really want to do corporate law that summer, and I hadn't applied, or I hadn't been able to find the job. So when I went to the public interest office, the advisor said, "What do you really want to do?" And I blurted out I wanted to be in the courtroom. And so he said, "Well, you've got to go into criminal law then." And so that's how I ended up at the Legal Aid Society. The thing that grabbed me most about that summer was that law, I had been told that law was really boring and that it was really a lot of paperwork and things moved really slowly. But there were criminal trials. It was real life. I went with investigators into neighborhoods that I wouldn't otherwise have gone to. I talked to people I wouldn't have dared to talk to. And the lawyer that I was assigned to allowed me to second chair his trial. I didn't do anything, I just sat there. But even watching him pick the jury and make the arguments to the jury and eventually get an acquittal for his client was just life-changing for me, because it made things seem very possible, things that everybody had said was impossible. And so that's really what made me start looking in that area and find it exciting. I would not have found it if I hadn't really been open to doing things. I thought I wanted to do environmental law, but it turned out that wasn't the day-to-day life of that was not what made me happy. And so I would say that, in law school, you should really explore things that you wouldn't necessarily think that you're interested in, and follow your passion. If something grabs you and you think, "Oh my gosh, that was amazing," go with it. And I think at the time my parents were very skeptical, like, "Why do you want to go into criminal law?" But it all kind of worked out. So I would say use law school as an opportunity to explore things that you're interested in, things you're maybe not so interested in or not sure about. Use your summers, use your classes, use your clinics to explore all these different things.
Judge Adams, what about you? How did your law school experience affect your career trajectory? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I like what Judge Quo said in regard to follow your passion. I had to find my passion. I was a first generation lawyer in my family. I didn't have any lawyer mentors. I really didn't know what I was getting into when I went to law school. So I did exactly what she said, which was to explore all my opportunities. And that's what I encourage law school students to do. And so I just took a wide variety of classes. I took clinics because I had to find my passion, including I took a death penalty clinic thinking this is exactly what I want to do. The executive director of Southern Center for Human Rights out of Atlanta at the time was very passionate, Stephen Bright, and he was excellent attorney. And I participated in an evening meeting that he had to encourage students to join his clinic. I joined the clinic and I realized that was not my passion. It was his passion. I wanted his passion, but it was not my passion. So I just got a sample of different cases, different classes. I had worked for a state court judge in college. So I was interested in working for a judge at another level in law school. So I actually worked for a Supreme Court justice the summer after my first year in law school. And that opened me up to appellate court. It was a wonderful experience. I realized I liked appellate court as well as I liked trial court when I was in college. And then halfway through the summer, she was running for her retention election. And so she came into chambers and she said, my campaign assistant just quit. She got a job at Delta. I need one of you law clerks to be a campaign assistant. And so I volunteered. And so I left the Supreme Court midsummer and I was her campaign assistant and drove her all over Georgia to different campaign events. And I thought, yeah, I could be a judge. I want to be a judge. But then with all the campaigning, I realized I didn't want to campaign. I don't like this. This is not who I am. And so then I had to explore how can I become a judge without campaigning? And that led me to the federal bench. But after working for that judge, my summer of my 1L year, then I worked for the Federal Trade Commission the summer of my 2L year to get a little taste of federal government work. I liked that work. And so that was also something I knew I wanted to pursue in my career.
Judge Alboson, you had a little bit more of a kind of a linear trajectory because you mentioned you summered at the firm that then offer you a job right after law school, and then your paths kind of went into the campaigning mode that Judge Adams mentioned. Can you talk to the law students about how even if you may have started in a very linear pattern, you return to the firm that you summer with previously, how did that journey and then the experience of then branching out to something different?
Right.
Can you talk about
Sure.
that?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I really wanted to come back to my hometown and practice. That was my goal. And so when I had this, after my first year of law school, when this firm offered me a summer internship, I jumped at that opportunity. I really didn't go exploring any other place because I knew hey, I get to come back home. That position worked out fine. The thing that really I think changed my trajectory of my career was when I went to the other firm and I did the general practice stuff. I mean, when there was hardly anything I wouldn't try and do if I thought I could do it, as far as legal issues go. If someone came to me and they had a property line dispute, I took that case, even though I had never done a property line dispute. I mean, it's just a different area of the law that you're trying to litigate. And so I did anything and everything. But I also, in that process, uh, got invested in my community. And by doing that, I mean, I volunteered in a lot of different areas, from the Boy Scouts to I read to sixth graders. I took them on tours of the regional jail. I worked with different community organizations, and that kind of set me up when I did finally decided I'd like to be a judge after about 10 or 12 years of practicing law. And I started doing things intentionally because as Judge Adams talking about, it's a political event. You know, you have to be involved in politics. And so I started, intentionally involving myself in the political arena as well. And all of that community service work that I had done prior to me getting involved politically really kind of helped me out. It was the solid foundation that I had for my politics. And so when I did get the appointment, I had to go campaigning, as Judge Adams was talking about. It was second nature to me. I never campaigned for anything before, but I had been working in the community so much that it was everybody that I went to talk to were people that I'd already been friends with or associated with. And so it was not a big surprise with a fellow with a strange name like myself in Southern West Virginia coming knocking around going, hey, would you support me for a position of judge in my upcoming election? And so that's really what changed my trajectory. I mean, I think my law school career was about as normal as you can say for a law school career. There was nothing outstanding that I did or participated in. That, I wasn't on the law review. I didn't graduate order of the course. I was a good student, but I wasn't a great student, if that makes sense. I mean, I didn't have all those honors or anything like that, but I did well. I worked hard. I treated my law school career like a job. I tried to get as many classes as I could in the mornings. I did all my assignments in the afternoon. Tried to be done by 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, had my weekends free if I could. That's the way I treated it. I treated it like a job. And so when I graduated and all these things happened, and set me up to be noticed by the governor, to be appointed by the governor. All that community service work that I did, all that general practice I did. I mean, when I applied for that position, I was able to tell the governor, I've done everything that a circuit judge is going to be involved in. I mean, I've done it all. And so that had some credibility to it. And so that helped me get that appointment. It helped me in my election. And then all of that helped me when I applied for this job as a magistrate judge, and the district judges made that appointment. I was once again able to say, look, I've been in every area of the law. Obviously it's limited in federal court compared to state court, but there was nothing really in state court in federal court that I hadn't already done in state court or in my private practice. So that's really how my career, that's how I got here. I still pinch myself that I get to do this job and be on this esteemed panel with all of you all. But I've just been, I think Providence helped me get to where I'm at. So.
Thank you, Judge Albertson. You mentioned, Judge Albertson talked about community service, being in the community, and let's turn over to Judge Kaufman, because you mentioned how you wanted to work as a public interest lawyer, even from the time that you were in law school. So what informed that decision for you?
Yeah. So I mean, I came into law school, pretty confident that I wanted to do some kind of public service or public interest work, but I wasn't really sure exactly how I wanted to practice, or even if I wanted to be a practicing attorney rather than do some sort of policy work. So one of the best things that I did in law school was take advantage of kind of experiential learning opportunities. So I did a few clinics, I did a few externships, of course, my summer experiences. And those were extraordinarily helpful in helping me figure out not only like what kinds of law I was interested in, but really what kinds of practice made sense for me. And I think it's really hard to know till you're doing the work day to day what works. I definitely had some misconceptions about what I wanted to do, how I envisioned I would practice as a lawyer, and what I actually found myself good at and enjoying. So those were extraordinarily helpful. And then if you're going into public interest work where people are looking at the fellowship route, it's really, really helpful to have worked at the organization where you want to work, or at least in the community of organizations where you want to be. It's a small world. Like any job you want to break into, it's very helpful to know the folks there or know people who know people. The only other thing I would say is my general advice to law students is my refrain is go to happy hour. And I say that because when I was a 1L in law school, we had this like weekly happy hour series And I would go sometimes I wouldn't. And I remember there was one Thursday night where I was tired, I was behind on my work, and I was like, I'm gonna skip it. And last second I decided, you know what, I'll just go. And I ended up talking to a 3L that was there who told me about this really interesting civil rights law firm in Los Angeles, staffed by a bunch of former ACLU attorneys. And based on his recommendations, I ended up applying for my first summer job, ended up there and working on a project with the ACLU. And I never would have applied to it without that. I never would have ended up back at the ACLU without that 1L summer experience. So my whole trajectory in law school and life was altered by that split-second decision to go to happy hour. So I just say that to say, you got to get out there a little bit. You never know what opportunities are going to find you, what experiences may open themselves up to you. And that's the best thing I think you can do in law school and in the early stages of your career is just get out there and see what's out there.
And I think that is a common thread, if I hear from all of you, that you kind of have to get out there in law school, take a variety of classes, take a variety of clinics during your summers, try different things, even things that, that you turn out to learn, this might not be for me. That is also valuable information in deciding what might work for you. And I do think, since we graduated from law school in the eon of the dinosaurs, right, that I think nowadays law schools do prize more experiential learning opportunity, clinics, gap years between college and law school. There's so much more for the law students out there. But I also know there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of anxiety. Many of the law students joining us here are done with their 1L. They're going to go through their 2L second year, and this is the time when they have to start applying for law firms, start thinking about whether or not they want a clerk or not. Do you have any advice, for them as they kind of face that transition period? And also maybe word of encouragement, because I think what we want to leave you, dear audience members, is that there's no one way to do things. You are not going to miss out on something if you choose to go a certain path. But at the same time, it's easy for us to say that, right? Because we have, done the arc of our careers and everything did in fact work out. But what word of advice and encouragement can we give the law students to experience, to experiment, to try, when it does seem that the pressure from the marketplace or the pressure of law school loans or their maybe family background, as many of you mentioned, those of you who are first generation, many of us who kind of also have those financial burdens, how can they reconcile that desire for variety versus perhaps the pressure to focus on a singular path? And I leave it open to whoever wants to jump in with a response.
I think it's really important what you said, that there isn't one path. And I think there's a tendency in law school to say that like these are the 5 law firms you have to go to to really make it, or that you have to do certain things. But I don't think you necessarily have to. There's some things that make more sense than others. If you get a job at a law firm and it's something that might interest you, go for it. Don't feel like you should turn it down just to be different. But on the other hand, if you don't get an offer from a law firm or from the law firm you want, don't be discouraged. Wherever you go, do a good job. And I think, once you do that, other opportunities will open up. So I think, as far as encouragement goes, everybody's going to have disappointments. There were plenty of places I applied to where I got rejected, but you just have to say, well, that's not, it worked out in that way. Maybe it wasn't the place for me, and go to the place that wants you, that it's enthusiastic about you, even if it's a little less known. Some places are not well known now, but will become well known. Some jobs don't exist now, but will appear around the horizon. And so I would say, do the thing that is going to make you your best self, where you're really going to commit yourself, where you're going to do a good job, and then the next step will open up to you once you do a good job and are noticed.
Yeah, I would like to, law firms are one place to go look for summer work and what have you, but there's also a lot of unpaid internships, like in the U.S. Attorney's Office and in the Public Defender's Office and local prosecutors' offices and what have you, that I think law students ought to look at, because there are opportunities there that could materialize after graduation. I realize that in my case, in Southern West Virginia, there wasn't a whole lot of places for me to look for work. I mean, I was fortunate that this one firm agreed to take me for a summer intern, but I was looking to work for free if I had to for somebody, just to get the experience, to get my foot in the door, and have that opportunity to put that on my resume when I did go applying for a job. But I think, and I also think that people may not realize that, for example, if you go intern at the United States Attorney's Office, it's not just criminal law. There's a whole civil section to the U.S. Attorney's Office that they do all kinds of civil work for the government. So there's an opportunity to get civil experience in the U.S. Attorney's Office as well. So I just think there's all kinds of opportunities that may not be the normal route, looking for interviewing with a law firm and trying to get into the big firm or what have you. And those are competitive. It may be that if you know someone in your local prosecutor's office or your local public defender's office, that's a good opportunity to try and get your foot in the door, and that may materialize to something else bigger and better later on.
Well, my suggestion is to not limit yourself. And so when I decided, I mean, I was lost in law school. I'll be honest with you. I was lost. I didn't really have any idea what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a partner in a law firm. I thought I wanted to be a criminal AUSA. I didn't know how to achieve those goals. And so one night at Emory, they were having a panel discussion about former law clerks and applying for clerkships. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And so I attended that panel discussion, and that's what informed me on judicial law clerks. Otherwise, I had no clue. And especially with the federal courts, I had no clue, I had no exposure. And so, of course, I attend this panel discussion, and they tell you, you have to be on law review, you have to be in the top 10% of your law class, or you have to have a connection with a particular judge. Well, I did not satisfy any of those 3 requirements, but I still thought, I'm going to apply. So I applied. And I mean, I interviewed with the Supreme Court of Florida because I thought, I'm going to practice law in Florida, which did not happen. I passed the Florida bar. I have not practiced not one day of law in Florida because I followed up with the Alabama bar, but I was just giving myself options. But I mean, I just applied and I took interviews and I went to the interviews, and it just so happened that when I interviewed here with a magistrate judge, we interviewed for about 3 hours. She talked to me. And then by the time I drove back to Atlanta, she offered me the job, a 2-year clerkship in her chambers, which led me to, okay, now I have an established reputation in the courthouse. A district judge wanted a law clerk, word of mouth, pick Jerusha, she's great. So then I get a position with the district judge. Then when I had a district judge suggest that I apply for a circuit clerkship, and I thought, I don't know, I'm not really circuit clerkship type. And that district judge said, well, just consider it. That was a Friday. That Monday, I contacted my friend who was a career clerk for Judge Joel Dabina of the 11th Circuit. And I said, I think I may want to clerk for Judge Dabina. As there an opening? And she said, oh, we're interviewing today for our last opening, our last vacancy. Give me your resume. So I sent her my resume. On Tuesday, Judge Dabina interviewed me. Tuesday afternoon, I had the job. So here I am, clerking for the 11th Circuit, when I didn't meet any of the basic qualifications they say you have to have. So I think it's about just being true to yourself and not letting what other people say limit you, and pursuing it and see what happens. And when people drop seeds and say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Listen to them. Consider it, explore it, because you just never know what journey that you may have that's going to be ahead of you that's going to help you.
Judge Adams, I think that's great advice. I mean, I really do. I applaud you for saying it as clear as you did, because I sit here, I'm still trying to figure out how I got here because I'm not I was a first no one in my family ever graduated law school, much less went to a graduate school. So I still try and I scratch my head and go, golly, how did I get here? But I'm very fortunate that I did. But I wasn't the brightest bulb in the pack. I mean, my undergrad career in undergrad school, I was an average student. I did average on my LSAT. I was average, maybe slightly above average in law school, but I wasn't any, there wasn't any really great honors that I got in law school. I got none actually. So not just good honors. I got none. So, but you know, I worked hard. I worked really hard, and I worked hard in my community. And I was vice president of legal aid for West Virginia as a volunteer role, and loved that experience. Did that for 6 or 7 years, and that was while I was practicing law in my community. I mean, you can do those kind of things and volunteer and work in your community, and it opens up doors and paths and people who have influence who can help you open up other doors. And that's what happened for me. And it was just a way of me trying to give back to my community. My family immigrated to this country in the 60s, and I felt like they treated my family so well. My family was blessed as a result of it. I just felt like I need to give back when I came back to my community from law school, and I wanted to do that, and that opened up the doors for me. But there was, just like Judge Adams talking about how she fell into the 11th Circuit practically, but basically, I fell into this job as a judge, as a circuit judge, and that opened up the door and gave me the opportunity to step into this role as a United States Magistrate Judge, and the what comes along with that. I think it's a blessing to be able to do this job, and it just, I would not have had that opportunity had those doors not been opened for me by other people when I was out practicing law.
So what I'm hearing our panelists say is be open to opportunities. Sometimes you just have to decide about what's the next step. You don't have to necessarily envision the whole trajectory. Just focus on following your heart, the opportunities that present themselves for the next step, and just take that next step. And things will unveil themselves and kind of work themselves out as you're following your passion, you're following opportunities, as you're walking step by step. One thing that all of you also mentioned are some opportunities and challenges that presented themselves as you walked each of those steps in your career. Do you have any advice about what are some things that you may have encountered, especially for those of us and those of you who are the first ones in your families, in your circle of friends that may have occupied the professional space that you did? Any advice about opportunities and challenges as you take each of those career steps?
Well, let me say this. It sounded when I gave my description about how I got here, it sounded like the very first time I applied to be a judge, I became a judge, but I didn't. The first judgeship I applied for, I got rejected by the same governor who appointed me 2 years later. And the thing I learned from that was not to burn bridges. Was I sent him a thank you letter. The fact that the governor even knew who I was a big deal for me and my family. And so I just thanked him and said, hey, if there's an opportunity that comes along in the future, I'd be glad to serve you or serve the state in any way that I can. So the first time I was successful. And when I say the first time, I knew it was very political. You had to get appointed by the governor. I knew there was a judge retiring, and so he was going to fill that position. So I got 1,000 letters of recommendation from people in my community. When I say 1,000, I'm talking about it. My stack of letters was this thick. And that didn't convince him. I'm like, holy cow, what if I can get 1,000 letters of recommendation? That doesn't do it. And so, but it was a kick in the gut, but I didn't stop pursuing it. An opportunity presented itself again, and I got the second stab at the apple, and I got it. And so that was my challenge for me. Was I was afraid that my one and only opportunity to be a judge was given to somebody else, or somebody else got the appointment. But the reality of it is it'll come back around, and you got to be prepared. And the thing I learned on the politics side of it is don't burn bridges. You might be disappointed the governor appointed your rival to this position, but you know what? there's a new position that came along 2 years later, and I was able to apply for it. And if I'd have burnt that bridge, if I'd have got upset, the governor didn't give it to me, and and made it known to him that I was upset, what good would that have done me? And it would have burned those bridges. So I think you never know when, in your career, the person that you're competing with today may not be your superior tomorrow. And so you got to be prepared for that, and not to burn bridges, so that's a lesson that I learned. I'm glad I learned it the right ways.
I think that's a great lesson. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I would just say definitely persist, and despite rejection, because I certainly believe in that. Many people may not tell you that they applied multiple times to obtain the positions that they have secured. And I know I applied at least 3 times to get into the U.S. Attorney's Office. I had my mind focused on being a civil AUSA because I was a law clerk. I like writing and doing the dispositive motions and the motions for summary judgment. So I want to be a civil litigator. And I applied twice in the civil division, and I didn't even get an interview. And then one of my co-law clerks, when I was clerking, her husband was an AUSA in the criminal division, and she said, you really should apply in the criminal division. They need great attorneys there. And so I applied, and that's where I got the interview and got the trial court experience. And then when there was a vacancy in civil, I still had that desire to be a civil AUSA, so I transferred. But the door was open to me as a criminal AUSA. And if I had just said, I'm just focused on being civil, I wouldn't have explored that opportunity and applied. And then as far as a magistrate judge, I applied 4 times to be a magistrate judge. All of my colleagues, we have 4 magistrate judges here in this district, all of my colleagues applied multiple times. None of us got it on the first time. And so you just have to keep trying, because you don't know when you will be the individual that they need, right? Because the district judges are trying to fulfill a need. Maybe perhaps someone with certain qualifications, someone who's going to fit with the rest of the group. And so I had to gain the experience that I did in order to fill that need at that time. And when you accept that, okay, I'm rejected this time, but maybe I'm not what they needed, so let me apply again. You just dust off that resume and you apply again. So just don't let rejection stop you or discourage you from continuing to pursue your dreams or what you're interested in. Just apply again and keep applying and keep letting them tell you no. I had a pact with another attorney, and we had decided we were just going to let them tell us no every time. Every time we're just going to apply. Maybe one time they'll pick us. And it just so happened that after we made that pact, I was selected. But we had just decided there has to be qualified individuals that apply. We're going to keep applying. So just have it in your mind that you are going to continue to pursue what you want to do despite rejection.
That's right. Good advice, Judge.
And I would also say that if you help others, they will appear at the moment you need them to help you. And you don't know when that's going to happen, and you don't know who those people are going to be. And so, this is along with what Judge Abelhausen was saying about, helping others and not burning bridges. It's nobody gets to where they are alone. You are,
right.
You're always helping other people. And when you help them, people will say good things about you behind your back. And that's what will get you to the next step. And so building those communities, building those bridges, doing good for other people will always come back and help you. And then along those lines, also, you should not be afraid of letting the universe know what you want, what your dreams are. If you keep things buried, nobody's going to know how to help you. People want to help you. And so you can let them know that you're interested in certain things. I got my position in The Hague because I had spent the year, as I mentioned earlier, in Germany. And so when I joined the Justice Department, my colleagues there were like, oh, that's so interesting. You're interested in international law. There's this tribunal that just got started, and we know some people there. And so that's how I eventually, was led in that direction, because they knew that I had an interest in international law. But if I had never pursued that, and if I'd never let people know I was interested, nobody would have brought it up to me, because it wouldn't have been obvious that that was something that I wanted in my life.
Yeah, I was the only thing I was going to add. I mean, I think if you look at the folks on this panel, I don't think any of us had a plan to end up where we are today when we were coming out of law school. It only makes sense when you're looking backwards that it kind of looks like a path, but that's the reality for most people. Is there's a lot of uncertainty, particularly in your early years of practice, about where you should be and what you should be doing, and that's just kind of part of the profession. The other thing that I just want to acknowledge is that there are like massive financial pressures that I'm sure a lot of you are facing. And that may dictate certain choices for you, even if you would rather be at the U.S. Attorney's Office or at a place like the ACLU or working as a judge or a law clerk, whatever it may be. Um, I was fortunate. My law school had an extraordinarily generous loan repayment program, so I didn't end up paying for much of my law school tuition and expenses, but that's not true for a lot of people. And so, if you need to go make money, that's fine. Family circumstances might dictate, certain career choices along the way. But if you're interested in doing public service in some way or working for a nonprofit, I was at the ACLU. Our attorneys looked a lot like this panel in that there was no clear resume, the template resume for how you got to a position like that. People had worked at big firms, people had worked for the government, people had clerked, some people hadn't clerked, some people had been nonprofits the whole time, some people had bounced all the way around. I think you'll just find that as long as you stay connected to the work that matters to you, whether that is doing pro bono on the side or just staying in contact with people at places you want to work, you can find your way around to opportunities in the future.
Can we talk about that many of you have done both, private sector work, working for law firms, and also pursue positions in public service? There seems to be a misconception, perhaps, from law students that once you get out of law school, you are somehow wedded to one or the other, that there's almost a dichotomy, between the two. When in reality, it's much more fluid, that maybe being in private sector can help you be more competitive for, let's say, an AUSA position, or having been an AUSA or worked in some other public sector job, like being on the bench, can also then help you get work at a law firm. Can we talk about that there's no single path when it comes to choosing between public service and working for a firm?
Yeah, when I was practicing law, I still dipped my feet in the public sector as well. Like I worked as a city court judge for my small town, and for a little while I worked as a state magistrate judge in the court system simultaneously while I was practicing law. I would do that in the morning and then practice law in the evening to fill a temporary position. I did mental hygiene judge for a couple of years. So there's a way of, even though I'm in private practice and doing private work, there's also an avenue where you can dip your toes into the private and into the public sector as well. And then that gives you the opportunity to start showing people that you have the ability to make decisions from a judicial side of things while you're still out there practicing law and practicing with these people. So, I was able to kind of meld the two, the private sector and the public sector, throughout my entire career. There's times when I would, every couple of years, I was probably doing something in the public sphere. Either I ran for city council, for example, just different things like that. I was also in a police civil service. I'm not trying to throw my resume out there, but like police civil service commission, where you do hearings for police officers that are accused of violating the rules or what have you, and you have those hearings. And I was the president of that. That gives me the opportunity to sit there, and people call me Your Honor before I was ever honorable, for lack of a better word.
So even if you are in private practice, you should be looking at ways to give back in the community. You will meet people, doors will open to you, you will learn of opportunities. Any other advice?
I think bar associations are a great place to stay, to be outside your siloed workplace interests. So if you are, you can join a bar association and be part of a committee that focuses on a subject matter that's different from where you're working. And so that shows up on your resume, and that puts you in touch with people in a field outside your own. So when you're trying to make a transition, you already have a toehold in that world. I would say, when you're making these pivots, number one, it is easier if you're private practice moving into another private practice position. Same thing with public interest. But when you're trying to make that jump, we're all trained as lawyers. And so you should be an advocate for yourself and make the case for yourself and pull on the things that you do have to offer, like your skills. And so even though you don't know that specific area of law, let's say, you know a lot of different things around it that enable you to make that transition and to learn that new area of law. So I think if you focus on your skills and you think hard about what you have to offer, what you've gained in your past experiences, and also think hard about why you want that job. And I think if you are able to pull those things together, you can make a pretty good case for why that new employer should take a chance on you, even though you haven't done it before.
Talking about pivots, I am getting some questions on the chat. And so if this is all right, what I would like to do is kind of do like a lightning round with each of the panelists, because I think the questions that we're getting are very much questions that I think our audience has. So one of the questions is, what particular challenge kind of stands out in your mind that you experienced as you were going through your career trajectory? If we can just have each one of you answer, take that question, and then I'll go with the next question in the lightning round. If we can start with Judge Kaufman, what challenges did you encounter?
Yeah, I mean, I think early in my career, it was just finding a permanent job. So I did 4 years of temporary positions between clerking and 2 fellowships. And so if you want to break into nonprofit work, I think that's a huge challenge. And so, if folks are doing that work, I'm happy to chat separately if folks want to talk about their career trajectories. But I think that's a real challenge because a lot of organizations can't afford to train young attorneys, and so they will more often hire people who are a few years into your career or substantially into their career rather than hiring right out of law school.
Judge Alboson?
I think for me, it was a personal challenge of having the confidence to go out there when I first started my career. Can I do this job? Can I really represent somebody on these matters and do it in a way that, I was scared to death going in the courtroom, believe it or not. I mean, it was just something that scared me to death. And I don't think I was I don't think I was as good a lawyer as I've been as a judge. I mean, I think it's okay to admit that, is that I don't think I did. I think my best work has been as a judge and as a lawyer. I mean, I did good work and I represent a lot of people and had a lot of successes, but I never felt like I had the confidence in me to really do an outstanding job as a lawyer. Now, maybe my clients felt otherwise, but for me, for some reason, I had to battle that internal conflict. I just don't know that I was that good of an attorney. And so, but obviously that didn't hinder me getting into the judicial realm. But that was and I know that may sound a little unusual, but that was my biggest challenge, was myself, just to know that I had the confidence to try to do what I was doing in all the different areas that I was practicing.
And I'm going to echo that because confidence was the thing as well that popped into my head when you mentioned challenge. And for me, I think a lot of it was approaching other people, and just like in law school, I never went and talked to professors during their office hours. I never talked in class. I just didn't put myself out there because I didn't think I had anything to offer. And so I think over time I've overcome some of it, but honestly, I'm not naturally an extrovert, so I really have to push myself to get out there and talk to people. The very short advice that Judge Kaufman gave of go to happy hour is excellent. I wish somebody had told me that. But I think you really do have to put yourself out there and be a little vulnerable, because you'll say things that in class that aren't super smart, or people say that's wrong, but you have to be able to just do it. And because you get better at it and you practice it and you realize that sometimes you do say things that are smart. And so I think building that confidence and the confidence to be wrong on occasion and to make mistakes, I think is really important to learn early.
Judge Adams?
I agree with everything that was said. And what that reminds me of is I had to acknowledge that people didn't really know the positions that I had. So as a law clerk, people hear law clerk, but attorneys don't really know what judicial law clerks do. So once I realized they didn't know that my job is to really be counsel for the judge and assist the judge, I had to convey that in job interviews. This is how I can help you because this is what a law clerk does. Same thing as a AUSA. People hear, oh, you're a federal prosecutor, but they don't really know. So I had to recognize, let me explain to you how being a civil or criminal AUSA and all these duties that I fulfilled can translate to private practice. How I know discovery, how I can handle a deposition, right? And so you have to sometimes explain to others the responsibilities that you filled and how it can convert to what they need. And I didn't realize I needed to do that as a young attorney. I thought everyone knew what everyone did.
You mentioned clerkships, Judge Adam. If I could have make best use of the few minutes that we have left, I would like to ask two questions. First, clerkships. You know, many of you had clerkships or are now hiring law clerks yourselves. So, any advice about how to make someone stand out as a candidate for a clerkship, even if they don't have perhaps the grades or the law review experience in their resume? So that's one question. And then the second question, if you could quickly just also talk about what made you decide to be a judge and how fulfilling that has been. And so if we can just take a couple of minutes, address that. And so I think that might be all the time that we have in terms of questions, but those are two big topics. If I could have you speak briefly on that. Judge Kuo.
Well, I think being a judge is great. I love the variety of cases that we hear. I love being in the middle of such an important institution. Walking into the courthouse and seeing members of the public here is really inspiring. Seeing juries render fair and impartial verdicts gives me faith. And so I feel really privileged to be here, and I am growing and learning every day. So that is wonderful. As far as law clerks, I think the willingness to work hard and really to have a passion for the work goes really far. I think that will overcome sort of average grades in law school, and you know, your ability to explain why it is that you didn't maybe, well, I'll put it this way. The fact that a person starts out with low grades is never a problem. I want to see improvement. I want to see that somebody is learning. I want to see somebody who will learn from his or her mistakes. I want somebody who will grow in the year as a clerk. And so I'm looking for potential. And so the ability to work hard, to be organized, to really learn from the experience are the key things for me.
Judge Adams?
So I wanted to become a judge because I loved clerking, and I thought, well, I could actually do this job and be the decision maker rather than just being a law clerk and providing the drafts or advice or counsel. And so that's really what opened the door for me, is clerking at the different levels, saying, oh, I could really do this. I think I would really enjoy being a judge on the bench. As far as standing out as a law clerk applicant, I really enjoy talking to individuals who can explain why they want to clerk for me, not everyone else. Why me? Why do you want to come to Montgomery, Alabama if you're in Chicago? You know it's going to be hot here. I mean, that type of thing is explain why you really want to come work for me, because it's such an intimate chambers. We work together as a team, work together all the time. And I only have 2 staff members. So it's 3 of us trying to conquer the world. And so I need to know why you're interested in working for me and assisting me in the tasks that I have. That always stands out than to have a candidate who just talks about they just want to be a law clerk to a judge.
Judge Abelson?
Well, I'll start off with the easy question first, and that is being a judge. It is the greatest job I've ever had. I'm blessed to be here. I don't I try not to take it for granted that I get to do this job either as a state judge and now as a federal judge. I mean, it is the job of a lifetime, and you know a lot of folks who live in bigger cities will go and work in law firms and make real big money at big law firms, and then a position like this comes open and they can't afford to take the pay cut to do this position. You know, in Southern West Virginia, it's not a pay cut for me to take this position. It's actually a benefit. But I do realize in larger cities it may be a pay cut. But my goodness, I hope that the pay doesn't become the issue that decides, well, you know, I'm not going to apply to be a judge. I hope that people would look at that and go, that is a good job to have, and the things you can do in a position like this for your community, for your country. We have the opportunity to rule on some really important issues at times, and it's a huge privilege and an honor to be able to do that. So I would encourage people to not let the money be the deciding factor, to not pursue a judgeship if that becomes available to them. As far as the clerkship thing goes, you know, I never tried to apply to be a clerk for a judge because I didn't think I had the grades, kind of like the question that was asked. I don't know that I had the grades to do that, so I just probably didn't put myself out there. But I do think you can overcome those grades. I mean, my grades weren't bad, they just weren't great. They were just good. And so I think you can overcome that by once again, you're being forthright about that when you're having your interview, when you apply for the position, and also as I think it was Judge Quo that said that you know, the willingness to grow and show that you've improved and what have you, I think is important, and also showing your life experiences, what you've done in your high school and college and law school career, that gives you some experience that can be beneficial to the judge. I think can also help overcome the grade issue.
Judge Kaufman.
Yeah, so I didn't actually plan on becoming a judge. I wasn't thinking seriously about it. It was only recently in my career that I even felt like it was something I could do. But when I was looking at this position in particular, the mix of jobs that here in the Central District that the magistrate judges do, you work on civil rights, pro se civil rights cases, you work on habeas cases, which is all stuff I had done previously. And then I'd done a lot of civil discovery and federal court litigation. So that piece of it just felt like a great mix. And the opportunity to contribute on this side of the bench was an opportunity I didn't want to miss out on. In terms of law clerks, I've hired all of 2 law clerks so far. But I will say in general, when I've hired people in the past and for this position, references matter a lot. Having people that can speak to you, of course, about your legal research and writing abilities, that's in large part what you'll be doing as a law clerk. But also just who you are as a person, what it's like to work with you on a day-to-day basis. As Judge Adams was saying, this is a very intimate working space. You're working in a small group, sometimes on really stressful, difficult issues, and having people that you know you can get along with, you want to work alongside is really important. So make sure you have those people in your corner when you're applying.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about your trajectory. I hope our audience members have heard something within your journeys, within your sharing that resonates with them and gives them the advice and encouragement to pursue their own fulfilling careers. Dear audience members, I hope you learned a little bit more about what federal magistrate judges do. You might want to consider that also as a clerkship opportunity as you explore what you want to do after law school. We want to thank all the panelists for sharing of your time, and dear audience members for you accompanying us during this discussion. We wish you best luck in your law school careers, and we're here if there's anything else we can do for you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.